Hey, welcome back, guys. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. We got a show for you coming after a win, so maybe the tone of this one will be a little bit different than the last couple that were a little bit more doom and gloom. We're going to see how the temperatures kind of changed in the room following the win, if the outlook for anybody is affected, and kind of where does the season go from here, and then the offseason on top of that. As always, we're coming to you from the Better Call BADEAUX podcast studio, and if you need help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call BADEAUX at 504-323-777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review. And as always, check out our friends, Firehouse Subs, Veterans Boulevard location. We have an event coming up there during the bye week, and you want to come and check us out there. We will be there then, and go there any other day you're doing your holiday shopping. Pull up, get a sub, get energized, and hit the mall and do your thing. Here we go, another episode of the show.
Guys, what's up? We back. It's another week, and we're here for the NewOrleans.Football podcast. And I think, like Nick said, we can assume that this one won't be as sad as some of the other ones because the Saints won. And it's fun. It's more fun to talk about a winning football team than it is to talk about one who, loses every week. So we're here to do it. Like we always say, we here every week, regardless of what the team does. We got a job to do. We're all pro, and so that's how we're doing it. So let's just jump into it. This week we saw a very different looking team versus the Rams. I think it was fair to kind of question if the team was still really locked in, right? I mean, you got a bunch of guys who spend, years competing for a Super Bowl. They've had success. And then you are all of a sudden you're 3-7, right? And then, and the things aren't going well for the new head coach, et cetera. And so, yeah, I thought it was a fair question, but you look at the team this week. They played, right. They came out and they played, and they were very injured, and they had a good game. So it to me, I'll start off saying that impressed me. The fact that those guys they got played, they had some pride in what they do, and they basically they played as good as a game, not as good as a game they played this year, but as clean as a game they played this year. So, Mike, we'll start with you this time. We started with Nick last time on the first spot. So yeah, just what are your thoughts on like how the team came to play, and what do you think this potentially means going forward with them if they can continue this?
Well, two different things. What it means for this season. I mean, they cracked the door open to be like, what if they like pull off a sneaky win this week, and then all of a sudden they're going into Tampa, only a game out of first, but they're going to play at the Niners this week, and they just look like Goliath. So I guess that means if they could somehow pull off, the most unexpected win in the season at San Francisco, then we'd have something to talk about. But yeah, no, it's more about what you said. I mean, look, we spent it feels like the main topic over the last month was DA's job security, even though it's kind of a silly topic only 10 games into his tenure. But we said he's going to have to prove over the final 2 months of this season that he's not going to lose this team. And proving that, at least in the short term, was really important, I think.
I don't know if I don't know if I go as far as calling it a silly topic though. Like if the season spiraled out of control, it was a valid topic.
It's still silly at this stage.
It is. But I think looking ahead, it's like, well, if they lose this game and then they lose to San Francisco and they lose to Tampa Bay, like suddenly you are in a position where that's a possibility. So there were signs there where I think you're looking at it and saying, all right, like if this, and this happens. But yeah, obviously the stance here was always you don't fire him right now. And I think that let's just call this game what it was. We were kind of jabbing at him for coaching. The whole fan base is jabbing at him for coaching. They won this game because of coaching. They coached their way to a victory this week. They schemed their way around being down 3 offensive linemen with a good plan for how to slide and protect against Aaron Donald, kind of using Bobby Wagner is the read player for when to do that and when to man up. And they had the communication down on point with 3 replacement players, and that didn't fall apart. I think Pete Carmichael, look, I still want to punch myself in the eye every time I see a 2nd and 10 run, but I think that was probably one of the more creative game plans of the last several seasons, maybe one of the more creative ones with Taysom Hill. I think Sean was kind of scratching the surface on that a little bit. And not having Drew Brees and having Andy Dalton as your QB probably allows you to kind of go down a little bit further on some of that and dive into it a little bit more. And maybe the criticism there is that it shouldn't have taken 11 weeks into the season to kind of do that. But it was a good game plan, and they got around with what they had on defense, losing another defensive lineman, scheming up some blitz with the linebackers and getting there. Granted, all this stuff happened against a poor opponent. I don't think you
A
celebrate beating the
zombie
Rams.
opponent.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was unbelievable how bad they were, wasn't it? I mean, I couldn't believe
I
it.
didn't know it was that bad. I thought the Saints were as bad as it got. I didn't know they were like 3 levels below what the Saints had reached this season. The Rams came in determined to make sure they didn't win the game, and they also don't have their own draft pick, I don't think. So that's kind of weird too. They're not tanking for any reason. They've just
Do
checked
they
out.
ever have a draft pick?
No, they don't.
But yeah, look, I thought it was a good day for the coaching. And again, I don't think the result, like some of the stuff we're talking about here, I don't think the result is the big takeaway. I think when you're looking at it through the prism of like, all right, what's going on with this coach? Is he going to be the coach next year? Is the team going to respond to him? Can they fix this? The stuff Mickey Loomis, Dennis Lauscha, Gail Benson are going to be looking at is some of the stuff we saw in this game. They responded. The coaches showed up and coached hard. They had a plan. They had an idea for how to try to get out of this. And the effort was there. So they didn't have the penalties. They cleaned up their tackles. They got below double-digit missed tackles for like the first time since, I don't know, week 8 or something like that. It's been a while.
Week 8 last year.
Yeah,
it's been a minute. I wrote it in my story. I think it was even before week 8, but the things that we were kind of hammering them on, they cleaned up and they fixed, and that does mean something. I don't know if that changes course on anything, but I think it just kind of shows that like at this moment today, it's not as dire. Now they could go and get smoked the rest of the season, and you end up back in the same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The team didn't quit on the coach this week.
That's a big deal.
Yeah,
no, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And listen, DA's gotten a lot of fire, and DA, typically when you get a lot of fire, it's usually for a reason, right? This stuff doesn't come, you don't see 10 and 5 teams getting fired. Coaches being under a lot of fire. But if you ask me today, even before this past game, if it was more likely than not than DA would be the coach next year, I would probably say yes. I would probably say I would probably still have said, regardless of everything that's going on, he's probably still the coach next year. And so, I think that matters, right? And I think that context matters. And I think you saw.
Let me interject real quick. Not sorry to interrupt you. And I think when we make those statements here, it's kind of looking at how they operate more so than. I think people get confused when you say they aren't going to do this, that you're saying they shouldn't do this or they shouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. And maybe you are saying they shouldn't, but I think a lot of times when we say things, I'll go read the YouTube comments. I'll be like, and it's like, look, I'm just telling you, like, I'm analyzing the situation and telling you what I think is going to happen. I'm not telling you what should or shouldn't. Like when it's my opinion, that'll be clear. But the idea of Mickey Loomis and Dennis and Gail firing somebody one and done on the football side, it's hard to fathom. Period. Unless it's a total disaster. Like it's just hard to see them because we haven't seen them operate that way too often. Like, but they will cut bait on a bad mistake and be okay with it, whether it's eating a huge cap hit on Jimmy Graham, Junior Gillette. There's
Brandon Browner.
Brandon Browner.
One and done.
There's been a handful of things where they've course corrected really, really quickly when they need to. So if it got there, I think they would, but they aren't going into that lightly. That's just not something they're going to do.
Well, I want to interject too, because you pounced on my word silly. My only mention of the word silly was the idea that there was any thought Dennis Allen would be fired 10 games into the season. But DA taking fire, as Kevin said, is absolutely fair game.
Yeah.
That's the number one storyline among us analyzing the team, among every fan I've ever talked to, is the job DA is doing, and he has earned that, and that's fair game. We can pick apart Dennis Allen every week until the season is over, and the Saints are going to pick him apart. I just meant the concept of him being fired at 10 games into the season is the only silly thing, but he's fair game. We can throw darts.
I didn't mean to DA you and pick one word out and be like, well, I wouldn't say this.
But
I didn't mean to jump on you. That wasn't intended.
When we also said how they operate, and you mentioned all those Saints examples, I mentioned last week, and I think we mentioned a couple times. I do wonder. First of all, Mickey Loomis doesn't have anything to do with the Pelicans, except he's a trusted friend and advisor to Gail Benson and Dennis Lauscha, and they might bounce ideas off him every once in a while. But I do wonder if the Stan Van Gundy example is relevant, because it is Gale Benson and Dennis Usher. That David Griffin had a huge part of that decision. He has nothing to do with the Saints, but it does prove that a lot of these same people we're talking about were willing to cut bait on this was the wrong direction for our franchise after just 1 year. So it's not completely out of character that they would do that. But again, I think we would all be surprised.
What if it was like the stadium wasn't completely full this game? Now, like, let's say if they kept losing and now it's 60% full and 50% full, and now the team's getting booed and it's more the other team, and it keeps going. Like, I do wonder if some of that stuff would kind of, like, I think naturally that the people in the money people, I think then they start kind of having a voice too, and I think you start hearing everything. Like, I think there's a possibility that the thing kind of
it's all fair conversation heading into next season, and we need to see what we saw this week a couple more times before the season is over.
Well, they're 4-7. And they were shooting for the Super Bowl. So, I mean, you got to be, there's no choice. Like, you walk, that's the fire. If you make a formula for fire, that's probably, that's probably all the best thing, probably organic fire. That's the best fire that they walked in. So, yeah, I mean, I think that has to be the case. But, like I said, and I don't think that, I have this theory in my head, and I don't know if we need to get into it, but it's basically like, I think, if you're going to make a coaching change, I don't know if after the season is the most ideal time, because it's a very unattractive team, right? From the outside looking in. I think the next year you may have a more attractive situation than and listen, I mean, we're talking about DA like he's already gone, but that's just what we do. This sports talk, man. No offense, DA. But yeah, I mean, I just think that the team is more attractive and you have a better chance to maybe get Brian DeBoer to come here versus someone who's, maybe just looking to get a job. And so, I know that's not what everybody want to hear. That's not what I'm saying they should do. It's just a theory. And Nick, you're right. I learned very early when I started podcasting, must have been like, I don't know, 5 years ago, that if you just mention something and it becomes your facts, and then people just be like, oh, you want them to trade Drew Brees? And I'm like, no. So yeah, that is.
Was Kevin? Oh wait, I wasn't on the pod back then. Was Kevin like in 2018? Like, let's move on from Drew Brees. No. I'm tired of him. Kevin wasn't one of those.
No, this is the podcast. Like, the OG members of the podcast. It was like the do anything to have a decent quarterback podcast. Yeah, like that's always just kind of been the
you know what, Nick? I'm gonna stop you there because that's a little bit on my fun topic side. So I'm gonna put the brakes.
I look forward. I'm gonna pull the
emergency. I want to say this though. Like, I think that it's possible a year from now that this isn't a completely unattractive job situation. If they have a good draft and they get a couple starters in this upcoming draft, like, you have a really solid, decent young core. And we've kind of mentioned that a few times. And very quickly, and I'm not a believer yet. I'm waiting for the bottom to fall out, but like Kaden Elliss might be part of that core too. He keeps piecing together good games. I mean,
exactly.
Suddenly now you have your linebackers, and that's kind of, you can build around that. You got to get a whole new pass rush. I think that's, unfortunately, and I'm not closing the door on Peyton Turner yet, but he hasn't opened the door, so I don't know really what's behind it at this point.
He kind of stuck his foot in there a little bit and just didn't let it get closed on him, though. Lately, I think he's been looking more like an NFL defensive end.
Yeah, no, and he made a play here, and then somebody falls on him. That's just kind of how the season goes. And on that too, like the injury thing, I was tweeting about this yesterday, like. Again, I hate to say it, and I'm not defending the medical staff here, but I don't know enough what goes on behind the scenes. I don't know if they're botching the rehab process or not. I don't know if some of these lingering things could be unlingering. There's just too much unknown there. But like the core suffering of injuries here, like, just got to be realistic about it. Like, this stuff is a guy falling on Peyton Turner. Like, Matt Ray can't go out there and like send a force field from the sideline to protect him. Like, a lot of these injuries are collision, brute force trauma type injuries, and there's just nothing you can do about that. You can't do anything about James Hurst getting a concussion.
I can't think of any.
Cam Jordan got his eye
gouged.
Like, you can't do nothing.
Do we have any hamstring?
JT Gray has a hamstring.
Yeah,
Andrews Pete's tricep, I'm guessing, isn't something that could be preventable, but that is soft tissue, so to speak.
Sure.
Those are the ones that they kind of say.
But it is really tough to now we can second guess guys' timing of coming back. And
I think the rehab
Paulson
process.
Adebo, Jameis Winston, But prevention, I don't know. I wouldn't know. I mean, it's way above my pay grade.
Yeah. I think the prevention thing, and listen, I mean, this is a little speculative, but just the whole Jameis situation, guys being out for 5 weeks, then going on IR. And I don't know the details of it, but I would say if there was anything to poke some holes in, I don't think the on the field injuries would be it. It would be, hey, why did this guy, play? Are you, I think just short-sightedness on some players, stuff like that. So, and look, I mean, I'm pretty sure this happens in a lot of locker rooms, but when you're 4-3 and 7, 4-7, then these issues just become our talking points, and so that's kind of the nature of it. One thing.
Look, on the IR stuff though, like I do think that like a handful of these are like, all right, we're gonna bring a guy up directly to replace him, and then the ones that don't go on there, maybe they don't. Star players, they're kind of hoping that they can beat a timeline. The one criticism I think that you would kind of maybe see is this week, like Andrew Speed's active and he's hurt and he's not starting. So like maybe he's partially available in this situation. But they also brought up Yasir Durant. They signed him and got him on the roster as a replacement. So I think like where there's a direct replacement for it, they've kind of made those moves. A couple of them, the Mike Thomas one is one for criticism. Marshawn's situation kind of lingering is definitely one where he probably should have went on IR. By and large, though, I mean, you kind of see that stuff around the league. It's just it's one of those things. I think when your team's struggling, like you're going to get a lot of criticism on this topic, and it's definitely fair. I think I mentioned it a couple pods ago that the timelines of some of the stuff like PJ being out, going on IR 4 weeks back, and then Marshawn lingering. That's the stuff you kind of look at crazy. But like the idea that people like think they don't know how IR works,
right?
And it's like they know how IR works. It's just these are kind of the decisions they're making, and I really. I hate to say it, but like, I really don't think that like it's mattered. I don't really think that it's hurt their roster really in any way.
There were always expendable people that if they needed the roster spot, they could have.
Yeah, there's 7 dudes that are inactive.
I mean, this week they released Nick Van Nett and JP Holtz because they needed the roster spots, and then they can resign. I mean, obviously people bring up the Latavius Murray incident, but even that wasn't a case of we don't. And
that was the right decision by Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray is the number 1 and number 2 running back right
Everyone
now.
else
So,
is,
even though
he's averaging,
he made the right call.
This isn't a defense of their injury management of the team's
and they
medical
only
staff.
have 8, and they've used 5. So like I'm sure
6.
that played into it as well. Like Mark Ingram was obviously going to miss 4 weeks. A sprained MCL is a cut and dry 4 weeks. And they were like, let's keep him on the bench. And that was just let's not use one of our IRs. So that's played into it too.
Yeah, I can see them saving some. Yeah.
This is just bringing a little like rational conversation to the injury conversation. That's it. Like, I think there's probably some stuff that can be done better. I'm sure they'll probably evaluate some of the timelines and why people didn't hit them and, try to figure that all out. But I mean, I a guy that came from Alabama, like I'm just not gonna jump in that conversation and like act like he's incompetent. Like he has a track record, he has a pedigree. Some things probably have not gone perfectly, but I just don't think that you become that man and not know what you're doing at all. And I mean, Cam Jordan gets his eye gouged. It just kind of happens.
Yeah, that's one of those things. Yep. All right. So let's move on. So the Saints brought in Taysom Hill. They used Taysom Hill a lot more this game than they probably should have been. And, I saw the comment like, hey, the snaps are low. And, you think that, when you're kind of playing catch up and you can't score the ball, then he tends to, be less de-emphasized is probably how I would describe it. I don't agree with that philosophy, but I understand how it could. I understand how it could happen. But this game, they incorporated him a lot more. He got a lot more touches. He basically don't even still consider himself a tight end. He's just a guy that just gets snaps and is in the game whenever they need him to do something. So like, what does this mean going forward? Do you think two quarterback system is an interesting term? I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but like, how would you describe in fact, I'm giving you the keys to the Ferrari, Nick. How would you approach this going forward with Dalton and Taysom Hill?
Yeah, I think if you're gonna play Taysom a lot and you're gonna get Taysom a lot of carries, you have to have him throw the ball. I think that's part of it. Like if you're gonna have him come in there, Because the one thing you don't wanna do is have him come onto the field and have it be an immediate tell that this is a run, and sometimes it's worked sporadically, and you can do that, but I don't think you can get him the amount of snaps that everybody wants to see him play without him running the ball. So, like, yeah, you can come out there's times where your personnel is gonna tell you got 3 tight ends on the field, they're gonna think you're running, and they're gonna defend it like you're running. Sometimes you're gonna catch them off guard with the pass, but when you're passing the ball out of that look, you're not an advantage either, but you also don't wanna have the safety coming up in the box. So, like, every now and then, Taysom's gonna have to throw the ball. So if you're gonna use him in this way, you have to utilize him as a quarterback to a certain extent. He's got to throw the ball. I think very quickly in this game, I was kind of reminded of, all right, this is why he isn't a full-time quarterback anymore when he couldn't get that pass out to Jarvis Landry. And it was like, all right. But I think the way they use him in this game, if the idea is, all right, we're going to get him 15, 20 snaps every game, he's got to throw the ball some. So I think that is probably the right approach going forward with him.
Yeah, that Jarvis Landry play was so weird, especially in a game where they all had the Aaron Donald clock on their head, which was, I'm making a decision in 1 second. I mean, Andy Dalton missed that wide open Alvin Kamara, probably because I felt like this was a game where quarterbacks were only allowed to look at one half of the field. They did not have time to look at the other half of the field.
Oh my
But
gosh.
Taysom is like, well, Jarvis is wide open right now, but let me think about it a little longer and wait till that was weird. But no, look, I mean, he's perfectly capable of completing passes, though. He's not, but I'm fine with him just being an extension of the run game. As I've always said, I think that's the thing people have always missed in the Taysom Hill packages is yeah, okay, they know you're going to run the ball with Taysom Hill, but they also know you're going to run the ball a lot of times when you line up with Latavius Murray or, when he was the backup running back or, anybody else over the years. It's a run play, and it's a hard run play to stop. I think I didn't love, we talked about this in the members only pod. I didn't love how it looked on that drive when it was every other play. That kind of seemed silly to me to use that word again, especially when we're watching like Andy Dalton sprint off the field and sprint back on the field. And Dennis Allen said that wasn't necessarily by design that they said we're going to do in every other drive. It was the plays they wanted to get to on that drive. But I do like the idea. Like, I'm sure it was like 1st and 10, and then it was 2nd and 3, and on 2nd and 3, they wanted to get to this Taysom Hill play.
I guess, but if
like,
you're going back and forth, it is by design. Like you're the designers of it,
right?
So like,
but I mean, I don't think they said on the 3rd drive they will take every other snap. It was, now we're at 2nd and 3. I want to call this play. That was a Taysom play. I think some of that might have been happenstance, but it's very clear they wanted to get Taysom Hill like 10 of the first 25 snaps in this game. They just didn't know exactly what order they might.
If that's what it takes to get his no snaps, then
but like I want him to get those 17 snaps at quarterback. It doesn't have to happen. I mean, it ended up being something like was it 40-17? I mean, it wasn't quite as much of a split as it looked like it would be early on. But I especially want those. I mean, frankly, if you told me every single time you got to 2nd or 3rd and 4 or shorter, Taysom Hill comes in at quarterback, I'd be fine with that too. Like, but I do want him to get 15 plus snaps at quarterback in every game. I really do. Now, it is going to be a lot harder against San Francisco and Tampa Bay because those are two teams that are not going to give up, the two tough run defenses. And it has been true. You sort of abandon Taysom Hill, quote unquote, when you abandon the run game. And so the Saints, it's a lot easier. They all said this after the game. It's a lot easier when you're playing with a lead or at least playing in competitive in a game. When you're playing from behind, you can't get to all those plays like you want to. So easier said than done. I don't expect to see 17 Taysom Hill QB snaps at San Francisco just because I don't think that's the kind of matchup it's going to be. But yeah, I want to see 17 QB snaps from Taysom Hill going forward.
I think the thing with Taysom, and I'm with you. I think they need to use him more. I think he's one of their best offensive weapons. They don't have a lot of them with some of the injuries they have, and then the offensive line being decimated. And so he's the type of guy that can help you alleviate that a little bit. I feel like, but I do have one beef with Taysom, and I think with I think it's either call run or call pass with him. It's kind of what I see. And, Nick, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to tee this one up to you. But, I think that sometimes when the play design isn't there, like he doesn't scramble. And that's the thing I think that I would like to see more out of his game, right? Like if he's in the game for a run, then obviously you know it's a run play. But you know, some of those passes, if the ball isn't there or pressure's coming there, I think there's some opportunities for him to create. And so this you have this benefit with running quarterbacks where if the structure of the play breaks down, then the like I said, the benefit of that is the guy can get you, you know, 5 yards when it should be a negative 5-yard sack, right? So that's a plus minus of 10 yards, which is, you know, for this Saints team, that's like almost a touchdown, right? And so, you know, that's one thing I think that, you know, I would like to see more out of him. Maybe it's because he's not a natural quarterback. He's not a natural scrambler. Maybe he's a design runner more so than an improvisational runner. But yeah, just I think that's something that just stands out to me. It's just like, man, just
Yeah, no doubt.
scramble.
No
Yeah,
doubt.
just scramble.
He had a few in this game, but look, I think there were some plays too that they were definitely run pass options, and he was deciding pre-snap. There was one play where he saw that it was 2-man, and he took off because look, everybody's playing with their back to the ball, and you got the two deep safeties, and then Alvin's monopolizing the middle linebacker on a choice route, so he takes off. So I mean, there's stuff like that too, but I think I think he decides maybe a little bit quicker, but yeah, there isn't a lot of. But I don't know if he had a ton of opportunity in this game either, where he's standing back in the pocket and it's like, all right, this is happening. I'm gonna take off and go because there isn't anything here. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely the number one criticism of his game overall is that he doesn't use his legs as the check down, so to speak. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's been frankly, the most baffling thing about him throughout his
Might
whole
still
career.
be the quarterback if he
He
had
might
done
still
that
be a starting quarterback if
efficiently
that was
2
the
years
case.
ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I think we were all surprised that wasn't more of his instinct.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. All right, so Chris Olave, Mike. I mean, this guy, you know, all he does is come come to work every day and bring his lunch pail. Right? One of the old football tropes. But you know, he finally got deep with something I kind of, you know, is something I was hoping they would do more with him because I think he's more than a stick player, right? Like a curl player, you know, some of the ways they've been using more recent weeks, intermediate. So, yeah, just your thoughts on, you know, him and what they can maybe do to get him more involved, if that's
Well,
possible.
I think you just said it. It's so funny. I've been so impressed with his like I say to Nick every time, it's like when they like I don't even need to recognize the number who it is. When I see the ball in the air, and Nick's better at following the action, and I follow the ball still. But when I see the ball in the air, and then I see the receiver sort of glide 2 yards in front of the defender, I immediately know it's Olave. It's like he has a
Olave.
bubble around him. It's unbelievable
Yeah.
how open he gets on those curls and those intermediate routes, and the amount of separation that he gets. I say it looks like he's always open. Like we've seen
Always
him make
open.
like 2 contested catches all year just because he's always 2 yards open. And it was like a reminder. Oh yeah, we thought Chris Olave was going to be the deep threat for this team. So if he, you know, he's been so good at so much better at the other stuff than we even realized he could be. But he also has that deep speed, and it was such a well designed play to have him doing it out of the slot, even though Jalen Ramsey did follow him into the slot. Yeah, the sky's the limit. I actually feel like he's almost underachieved, and he's somebody that they could hit more home runs with.
Yeah, underachieved because they haven't gotten the ball.
They ain't got
That's
the
what I
ball
mean.
enough.
Well,
Yeah,
underproduced. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. They definitely need to get him more involved. More. It feels like you got to get him more targets. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like I saw something the other day. He's on pace to like pass Michael Thomas's rookie season production to be the team's number one receiver all time, and it'll be a fair record because he missed a game. So we'll still have 16.
true.
I've done it over 16
I was about
games.
to just say that too.
Yeah.
I was about to kill you, but my bad.
Yeah. So I mean, he's had that kind of season, and you know, it's on. Too bad he isn't playing with Drew Brees. You know, like I wonder what his numbers could be like.
What version of Drew? But yeah. That's
Either
fair.
one, because this guy gets open on every single route. They would have found other ways to use him. My only criticism of him is that like he doesn't really try to get a lot of yards after catch. He catches the ball, he goes down. He's smaller guy. Like that's
probably a good idea. Though.
Yeah, it might be, but that would be the only criticism on him.
He's seen the injury reports this year.
Yeah, Chris, get down.
that would be the only knock on him. Is that the yak isn't there right now?
I mean, I see his frame, and he's taking some bad hits this year.
Yeah,
like I think Nick, me and you were texting once, and I was just like, "Ooh, man, Chris got like a small frame. Like we can't be getting this guy hit like that, right? When you're 2-8." But but yeah, I think him getting him more opportunities, and I mean. Nick, is it me? Did he clearly get the best of Ramsey this game, or like was that just splash plays that?
I mean,
That's enough.
You get a guy for 57. I mean, you got a guy for 57.
You won the matchup.
Yeah.
You won the matchup. Yeah, I just think he's been like wildly impressive.
Yeah, it's like a few years ago when DK got, Marshawn for whatever. Yeah, I mean, he won the matchup. That's all
Or
you
Justin
needed.
Jefferson comes
Yeah,
to mind.
you get it all in one chunk, or you get it over 5. I mean, you still, the numbers are the numbers at the end.
Yeah, no, that's all that matters. All right, let's go into the future All-Pro undrafted free agent who I think might be a restricted free agent this year. I need to double check that. And that's Kaden Elliss.
Wait, no, hold on. You got 2 things wrong there.
He was drafted.
7th round drafted.
Oh, that's right. That's right. He was drafted.
Somebody, I don't know if they were purposely busting me. For some random reason, somebody retweeted me today where I said, and now here is the Saints complete draft class. Like now that it's over, it was like my tweet from that year right after that.
You left him off.
I went Kaden Elliss with only 1 S at the end. I showed him so little respect. I spelled his name wrong when he got drafted.
Someone called you out on the spelling?
No, somebody just retweeted that, and I don't know. I don't know if they were like pointing out, "Hey, remember this draft class? It's not because it also was the C.J. Gardner-Johnson draft class and the whoever their first pick was in that.
Oh, that was
McCoy?
McCoy that year.
Yeah, so they ended up having a few hits in that draft class. But it was just funny because the first thing I noticed was like, "Oh shoot, I spelled his name wrong."
Yeah.
But that shows you what we knew about him. But also, this is his 4th year, so it's not going to be restricted free agent.
They're gonna have me on Rashid Shaheed a bunch of times for spelling that thing. Man, I messed up his name like 100 times during camp.
Yeah. All right, run with it. I'm over 2 on Ellis. Let me
we're finding out about this guy. This is important
it's funny
stuff now.
During training camp, I remember asking about him a couple of times because he would just like splash, but I didn't think he would turn into could play as good as he played over the last 2 games. But I remember DA speaking high about him during training camp, and sometimes it's just opportunity and preparation, and so, but yeah, Nick, go ahead. You tweeted out his PFF grade, which is ridiculously high.
The number one thing about him, the most surprising thing is definitely the coverage and his range and his ability to get back and on the field and play in space and be in man coverage. And that's the thing where I'm kind of holding my breath and waiting to see, because like, are people going to figure some things out? Like, linebacker is a volatile position. It's hard to be really consistent at it. So we're going to see what happens. I'm not ready to declare anything about him, but everything he's done has been unbelievable. Like, he's arguably had the 2 best linebacker games of the season for the Saints.
And this is during Pete Werner's season too.
Pete Werner's season.
Pete Werner was looking amazing earlier.
His pass rush is insane. Like,
it's
the stuff
crazy.
he's doing. Like, he's hitting guys with like DM moves, but he's coming from the interior with speed from the linebacker spot. And like, and the way he's winning there isn't what you typically see from linebackers. So that's a little bit different. I don't think he's just a blitzer. Like, he's a guy that can rush the passer. I mean, I think when you kind of look at the idea of like, he was a defensive end in college, they brought him in, they developed him, they got him into space, they changed his position, and now he's succeeding. I think everything you're seeing from Kaden Elliss is kind of what they thought they were going to get from Zach Bond. I think they thought
Nick,
they were going to
killing me, Nick.
I thought they were going to bring Bond in. He was going to be that pass rusher on the interior, because they like to play the 3-man front and they bring the pressure. So like, those guys essentially become pressure players for him. I thought they thought they were going to be able to take Bond's pass rush moves and then add in all right, here's how you play in space, here's how you do this, and he was going to be able to do all of it. And it quite hasn't happened as hoped. Now, I will say the timeline of Kaden Elliss, maybe that's where you take a step back and say, like, maybe there's still a chance for somebody else. Like, that's a vote for patience a little bit. I'm not holding my breath.
Trey Hendrickson blueprint.
I'm not holding my breath on Zach Bond at this point, but I mean, I do think that idea probably started with Ellis, and they're like, all right, let's try it a little bit higher end with Zach Bond, and that's something that's probably been in their mind for a while, and now they're bearing a little bit of fruit here with Kaden.
The pass rush stuff is legit too, because it was very clear that they were making an effort to figure out how to get Ellis on the field at the beginning of the year, and it was on the edge of the line. Like, and they don't usually like those smaller guys as an edge rusher here. But I think he definitely got more snaps than ever, even before the Pete Werner injury. And he was mostly lining up as an edge rusher in those situations from the strong side linebacker position. And then I took note of what Demario Davis said about Ellis, which it was definitely hyperbole when he said, he's like, for the last couple of years, he's been the NFL's best kept secret. But the comment could have been completely different. It could have been, look, he hasn't gotten an opportunity around here. And when he finally did, he stepped up. to imply that he's playing up in the moment. But Demario Davis was saying, no, we've seen this from him for 2 years now, which adds a little credence that it's not necessarily a fluke.
Are you a believer?
Not that he can play at this level. And look, they wouldn't have drafted Zach Bond and Pete weren't traded up for Zach Bond, then drafted Pete Werner with a high draft pick if they thought they had this, future starter in the building. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about at some point older players, is he now the guy that replaces Demario Davis whenever Demario Davis's time is up? I mean, unfortunately, they're going to have to decide that in free agency. But
people have been wrong before, though. Like sometimes people just don't see it. Like Geno Smith exists right now. Like people are sometimes wrong. Are you a believer? Are you a believer of Kaden Elliss? I mean, Kurt Warner exists. Like
I believe
sometimes
that
people do miss. I mean, but it is. I agree. If he's a 10 out of 10 right now, like I'm expecting it to drop to a 7 at some point. And I think if he were a 7 out of 10, it'd be outstanding. It's hard to believe it's going to keep going, but I mean, just because it's been so long, and for the fact that you would come out of nowhere and it's like, oh, Luke Kuechly, like he was just on the team all this time and they didn't know. It's hard to believe. It's hard to buy into it right now. Kat, where are you at on it?
I don't think I'd say I'm a believer because he went against what may be the 2 worst O-lines in the NFL in back-to-back weeks. And I just got to hedge it against that a little bit, but here's what I did see. I see a guy that knows exactly what he's supposed to be doing on every single play, right? Which is the first thing. Like, he plays fast. And to me, when I see a linebacker that plays fast, that's automatically a good thing because I don't know if there's a bigger read and diagnose position in the NFL than linebacker. So that stands out to me. He's good on the ball. I love how they use him like they use DeMario, like in nickel packages. Like they actually scheme 101s for him. And I think that's saying a lot, right? I think the way he loops around, the way they do some of these stunts, I think I just see the Mario Davis deployment in some of those snaps that they play with him. And so I do think he's a good player. I think he's a better player than, maybe I don't think anyone was screaming Kaden Elliss get more snaps, right? So unless you're his relative, right? And so I think he's a better player than maybe most people thought he was. And I just think it warrants.
He's better than everybody thought he was.
No question. And I think it's something you have to see. So when you have the season that you're having now, then this is the type of stuff that you need to get more information about, right? This is kind of like a fact gathering season at this point, right? Like, who's going to be on the team going forward? Who can step up? What's the vision for the team going for the team for the remainder of the year? And that's trying to make the most out of it, and win some games and try to get some of these young guys to develop. Like hopefully Trevor Penny can come and play. But as far as Elliss, I think it's like the way I see it is, man, keep using them, get more data, and let it continue to play out. And if he does it against the 49ers, then I think this pod next week is a different conversation. It's a much different conversation because now it's becoming a trend, right? It's becoming a little bit more than a trend. And so, but I think it just bodes well for the team, right? I mean, like sometimes, these, injuries, they give other guys opportunities and they make the most out of it. So
who had Kaden Elliss as the bright spot of the season? Like I would have never.
Well, you're right about fact gathering season 2. I think it's gonna be. What do they do when Pete Werner comes back? How do you keep looking at Kaden Elliss? Do we all of a sudden see a lot more base defense from this team or something?
He had that tightrope surgery though, so it might be he's going to be out for. They're going to
get out for a little bit. Yeah,
they're going to have a good amount of. They're going to have a good amount of information.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's good because if he does this all the way, somebody has to stop playing. And what do you do at that point? It's going to be fascinating.
I'm here for the drama. I love that type of drama. Those are good decisions. I got too many
Yeah, it's tough, man. Because long term, if this stays going, you go with the younger guys. I mean,
you got to go with the
have to. Yeah, but in the short term, what do you do? Like, you got a legend, the guy that's
the injury
keep playing.
This is never coming to fruition. They're never going to have all 3 linebackers healthy at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, they can't even, that's like getting the whole O-line.
We've got like 4 more injuries before we get to that point this season.
Yeah. Good point. All right, so NewOrleans.Football podcast is officially about to come the first non-49er podcast that talks about Jimmy Garoppolo in back-to-back weeks.
Oh.
We spent way too much time on Jimmy G last week, but Mike Triplett, you was slandering Jimmy G last game, dragging my guy name through the mud. You drag him through the mud, you wash him off, and then you drug him back.
Killed me last night.
So is this about to be the Jimmy G revenge game against the Saints? Mike, come on, man. What you
well,
got?
he did two things. He proved me wrong and he proved me right. He proved me wrong because I was saying I don't think he's that much higher, than the the Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston class of quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater class of quarterbacks. So I wouldn't pay 5 times as much for him. But he proved me right because if he flashes like he flashed last night, he's going to cost 10 times as much as those guys. And the New York Jets are going to be paying him $35 million, and he's going to be way out of the Saints price range anyway.
Second round pick, number 2
Jimmy Garoppolo is going to cost. No matter how good he is, and I think he's going to cost more than he's worth in free agency, and I think the Saints should stay away. But I'll give the man a little respect. He took offense. He took offense to me saying that he's closer to the Dalton, Bridgewater, Winston class of quarterbacks. Fine, he belongs in the Carr Cousins class.
No, he definitely does. He definitely does. He definitely does. And look, the thing he didn't do last night is I think he looks. He'll have you looking at him every game, and you'll be like, "Man, this guy can play quarterback." And then he does the dumbest thing you've ever seen happen on a football field, and he avoided that last night. And that's really kind of been the Achilles heel with him. But when he is like Kirk Cousins, though, and I mean, if you have a good team around him, you can be in the Super Bowl. If you don't, Jimmy G's not going to carry you to the Super Bowl. And I think that is the class of quarterback that he's in. He probably will get overpaid. But if you're trying to keep a team together, like. I would rather be the 49ers and have a hope every year. And maybe you have a lot of injuries and you bottom out, and maybe you don't. I'd rather have a chance of can I be a contender every year than be, the Jets now.
The 49ers went to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. And they
almost
decided, decided I'd rather have a rookie than this guy.
Yeah,
they wanted Trey Lance instead.
Yeah, because
the Saints should definitely want the next Trey Lance.
He's not. Yeah, well, you definitely should. But I think that you have a Jimmy and you still want a Trey Lance. I don't think it's one or the other. I mean, I think you try to do both. He's definitely not a franchise changing quarterback though. That's more than established at this point. But yeah, I mean, I think I would rather have Jimmy than what's the Jets quarterback's name? Like I'd rather have that. Yeah,
if we're listing quarterbacks we'd rather have than Zach Wilson, we better sit back in these chairs right now.
The point is
Zach Wilson will be available next year.
I think the best quarterback strategy though is to have a Jimmy Garoppolo type with a Zach Wilson coming up behind him, and then you see and you find out, and you aren't forced to pick Zach Wilson because you have Jimmy. But if you like Zach Wilson in a reasonable spot, you can bring Zach Wilson in and try to develop him, and then he takes him out. I think the 49ers are in an enviable situation for a team that doesn't have one of the top. Like if you're going to the gas pump and there's you at 87, that's Andy Dalton, and 89's, the Jimmy G's, 93 is the Justin Herberts. And then you go over to the diesel and there's one of one, and that's Pat Mahomes. Like you don't want to be in the 87 range. Like if you can have a guy, in the 89 and you have a young player coming in behind him, that might be one of the other ones. That's where you want to. I think that's where you ideally want to be.
Have you ever put 89 gas in your car?
I had
89.
I had an Audi and I had to put 93 in it.
No, I said 89 though.
No.
That's the best illustration of my point. I never pick 89 over 87. I want 87 or 93. Hey guys, why is 89 even there?
One word, man. One word you guys missing, man. You just got to go electric. You're missing the whole point.
But yeah, no. And it's funny because we were talking about Jimmy G at length, but partly because Nick was talking about the idea of paying like an $18 to $20 million quarterback, and Jimmy G, who will probably cost way more than that, but if he is $20 million, he's the only $20 million quarterback. That's just a tier that doesn't exist. It is almost like you have to trade a premium draft pick and pay $30 million, or you're shopping in the.
Let me ask you though, would you just the only thing that matters, would you rather be the Vikings or the 49ers this year or the Jaguars?
I'd rather have Trevor Lawrence than Kirk Cousins or Jimmy Garoppolo at their
I'd
prices.
rather be one of those teams right now. I would definitely rather be the 49ers
of course,
or the
but
Vikings.
that's not. They would also trade their quarterbacks for Trevor Lawrence tomorrow morning.
Yeah, but they wouldn't trade their franchise to be the Jags, and that's kind of the trade off here. And if that's where you're settling, that's where you end up.
I'm just it's a resource question. I know the salary cap. The Saints have proven time and time again that the salary cap is fake, but there's some rebuilding. There's some real rebuilding they're going to have to do of this roster because of all the older players they have. And I'm just going to be careful about how I spend $25 million next year. And I don't want to invest that in a Jimmy
That's
G
cheap
rental.
now, though.
I know it is.
You paid $20 million for Drew Brees.
$25 million is cheap for a quarterback, but $25 million is a substantial amount of money for a team that's going to be about $25 million over the cap and is going to have to cut some players just to get
they're
allocating.
They have $24 million allocated toward, a little bit over $27 million allocated toward quarterbacks this year. When you look at it, Taysom is 10, Jameis is 14, and Dalton is like 3.
And Drew is 13.
Drew is still on the salary cap.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, wide receivers. That's wide receiver money now. You know, like if you want a good wide receiver.
I agree. I agree. For the right team, Jimmy G is going to be worth it. He's probably the right move for the Jets, who have built everything but quarterback and probably have a ton of cap space. I just don't think I don't think the Saints are there to be spending that much money on a quarterback that might not necessarily.
You got to figure out how many degrees of separation is it between Andy Dalton and Jimmy Garoppolo, and there is some.
It's 87 to 89. Nick's analogy was,
but on the field, right? On the field, and so you got to say, all right, you have this guy who knows the offense. He needs everything. Both of these guys need everything right around him, right? But Jimmy just he's a little bit better than Andy, I would say.
How about this pairing? Sean Payton, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jets next year. Maybe he's always liked him. I could see that.
Here's the thing, though. Like, if you put Jimmy Garoppolo on the right team or Kirk Cousins on the right team, you can make it a thought that this team could win the Super Bowl.
I don't disagree.
If you
at
put
all.
Andy Dalton on a team, they are not a Super Bowl.
I don't disagree at all. I'm just talking about.
So I would say the difference between the 87 and 89 is drastic. If that's
not current Andy Dalton.
I don't think that's where the Saints are. That's more of my
it's kind of like not gonna win because, and they're in the can win with.
I agree, but I just don't think the Saints are a can win with quarterback away from the Super Bowl. So I think a can win the Super Bowl with this guy investment is worth it for a can win the Super Bowl team. I don't think that's what the Saints are. So that's
a lot of other stuff that you got to have going on.
Last point, and then we should move off this. I think that you still acquire those players because it's kind of like if you're walking up to someone and you're trying to get them to go on a date and you don't have Desi Vegas Steakhouse money. You have, I can take you to Five Guys. She might go with you there. If you're offering McDonald's, no one's coming with you. You aren't getting the other players you need to build your team. If you're saying we are Andy Dalton level quarterback in perpetuity until we have a first round pick that we can take a quarterback.
I can't top that analogy.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. Five Guys is steakhouse price.
Nah, you
go to Five Guys.
Even better. That makes it an even better analogy. You're paying too much for the Five Guys quarterback.
But you're getting more with it though.
I'll say this.
You have a chance.
I will never allow Five Guys slander in my presence. It just won't. It can't happen. It's just so delicious. All right.
We topped ourselves there, right there.
I'll say this. We're never talking about Jimmy G again.
That's not true. We're going to be talking.
We're going to talk about him next week. Yeah, it's going to be 3 straight weeks
in December, January, and February. And I look forward to those conversations.
Just coming next week.
Jimmy G has become a blanket term though for that middle tier of quarterback.
It used to be the Dalton.
It's not specific to him. Like it's not like it's just like. The idea of having a quarterback that you can win games with, I think, is something that they should stick to, and I don't think they should say we aren't trying at all. And that's it. I mean,
yeah. He's Andy Dalton in Andy.
We don't need to have this argument every week, though.
Yeah.
We don't need to turn into Skip and Shannon fighting about Sam Darnold.
We will be doing this a lot, because. Quarterback, no matter what they do with this season, I mean, look, I'm rooting for them to beat Tampa Bay in 2 weeks, so we go into the bye week thinking, if they win 3 of the last 4 and get to 8 and 9, it's not like I want to do that for the next 8 weeks. I'm not going to lie, but as soon as the clock officially turns to next year, we are talking about quarterbacks all the time, and you're going to get sick of hearing us talk about what the next quarterback plan is going to be.
Yep. All right, final question. This is the Mike Triplet section. I think this last section was the Mike Triplet session too, but this is the
I
very
have fun with
specific Mike Triplet section. Excuse me. So we're having these talks about quarterbacks because the Saints need one. They're going to need one. They don't have their franchise guy. He's not in the building. Sean said that he had 2 of them at one point. I don't know what that meant. it was 0 at the time, but it's all good. And they don't have a first round draft pick coming up this year. All right. This is I hope Nick doesn't fire me because the boss is sitting in front of me. But these are just wild topics, right? These are wild topics. It's not something what some person would do, but I think it's fun. Say the Saints love a quarterback in this draft this year, right? And so what are if you're the Saints and any one of you guys, what would you say is the best contract on the team right now? If you had to pick a guy.
The best contract on the team right now, if you had to pick a guy, like as in
anybody, it doesn't matter how many years they've been playing, the best contract on the team, the best commodity.
Demario Davis is probably the most underpaid player on the team.
Okay. I mean, can I go Olave? Am I allowed to use a rookie
that's
contract?
where I was going. Yeah, I was going to say Olave, right? I was going to say Olave. He's a rookie. He's on the contract for the next 5 years. Mike won Mike's game, right? He's on the contract for the next 5 years, right? And you have a Sean Payton commodity too. If you're the Saints and is the quarterback you love, would you trade Olave? Because Olave, you can if you got Olave for Olave
immediately.
Is a top 10.
Immediately.
Top 10 pick.
Immediately. I love the dude. I started campaigning for him last year in like November. Like I thought he was the perfect player for this team. I was the guy saying he was the best quarterback or best wide receiver in the draft class. If there's a quarterback I even think could be my franchise quarterback, they're gone. Anybody on the team's gone. That's the most important position in sports. It's everything. So yeah, easy decision.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds us of going back to 2017. Marshawn Lattimore was one of the best draft picks in Saints history. And if they could have drafted Pat Mahomes, people would do that 100 times out of 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was just. It's funny because I was like looking at the updated draft order. Every week the Saints play. I'm looking at it, and I think they were like last week they were. I forget where they were last week, but I'm checking now. They're number 10.
I'd give him Olave in the first for the quarterback. Like if you can guarantee.
I will look. Let me go counterpoint though to Nick real quick though, because that's sort of an argument to have never drafted Olave or Trevor Penning in the first place. And you do make the point over and over again that a lot of teams are chasing a ghost when they think
they are.
If I use my first round pick on a quarterback, there's no more failed first round picks in the world than there are on trying to take a quarterback. So if the question is, would I trade Olave for the guy I'm absolutely in love with? Yes. But if the question is, should the Saints have drafted Kenny Pickett instead of Olave? That's a different question.
That's a whole different range.
Right, but if he was the number one quarterback on their board, should they have gone quarterback instead of Olave? Yeah, but what if it's Zach Wilson? What if it's blah blah blah? So like you got to have conviction to do that. And if you traded Chris Olave and you got next year's 12th pick in the draft, and you're getting the 4th quarterback in next year's class with that 12th pick, it's actually a fair time. We both scream, of course I want the quarterback, but who is the quarterback? That's the much harder part of the equation.
And I'm not arguing with you. I think you the point here is like, if you're giving up Olave, you got to love, it's got to be the quarterback. It's got to be Levis or whoever you like, the guy you love. My devil's advocate to the point you just made though, everybody is so bad at drafting quarterbacks. And there's the whole thing, like, I would make the argument that people are so horrible at scouting and drafting that position that throwing darts is probably working as well as having conviction. And if you don't have a quarterback, I think somewhere in your first 2-3 picks, you should be throwing a dart. You should be throwing a dart somewhere. And people don't hit even when they think they're going to hit. Like we're talking about the 49ers, like they traded up. There's evidence that maybe they didn't hit. They probably didn't hit the way they thought they should. Maybe, Trey Lance turns out, but it happens all the time. So if you don't have one, I think there is a case to be made for just like, all right, let's try. Like, are there traits here? Let's try. I mean, so not trading Olave, but I just mean in general, like in a general sense of the theory. I mean, I think there's a case for it.
it's tough. I mean, you just can't force yourself into the position. It's got to be the player. Like, time will tell on Kenny Pickett if they screwed up on that. But I mean, the Saints obviously needed a future quarterback, and they had 2 first-round picks this year, and they didn't force that pick. And I won't blame them unless
the
it
quarterback
turns out
wasn't. This wasn't a quarterback
if they
draft,
didn't have
though.
the guy. Yeah,
They forced themselves out of the next draft. Is kind of what they did.
That's a mistake.
That's the
What
problem.
I'm saying is, sometimes you're like, all right, in a fantasy football draft, you're like, I need a QB. I'm going to take the next highest guy on the list, and that's something that good teams don't do. They don't take a guy, well, we have a 4th round grade on him, but we need a quarterback.
The 49ers did for a long time. I mean, and that was a Packers philosophy. So like two of the best teams,
they probably like those guys.
But the Packers as a philosophy, every other year they were taking a quarterback, and they're one of the better run.
Now that was good scouting.
They're one of the better run franchise. But they just thought that there was a chance. Like, I think that, like, if you read like some of the books and the literature on them, like their thought process was that it's an imprecise position. People scout it poorly, even when you have good scouts, and that you just need to keep trying until you hit one. And then worst case scenario, you have one in your building, you develop them, and somebody else needs a quarterback, and you're able to trade them and get something
before
for them.
You give the 49ers too much credit, though. I covered that team for 5 years.
I'm talking about Packers.
I know, but before you threw the 49ers in there, that
was Bill Walsh era,
though. They drafted Jim Druckenmiller in round 1 to be the heir to Steve Young, and then they drafted Gio Carmazzi first among all quarterbacks in the Tom Brady draft class. So
you're kind of making the point,
sometimes you make historic whiffs, too.
You're making the point, though. Like, it's even well-run franchises with good scouts that make good decisions have a hard time doing it. And it's starting early or starting late. Like, I know teams that start early often don't hit, but teams that start late don't hit either. So like there is no process here. So I think the only way to solve the problem is by trying until you solve the problem.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. Anyway, I just was thinking about. I was looking at Chris Olave, how well he was playing. I was like, man, what can we get for that?
We would all trade him, though, for the right quarterback.
For the right quarterback. But what if the offer was made right now? What if Howie Roseman called and said, Olave was he 11th or 12th pick? He was the 11th pick, right? Olave for the 11th pick in next year's draft. Do you do it right now?
Last week I said yes.
Yeah.
And this week I'm probably you gotta.
If I'm convicted on one of the quarterbacks, I would do it. At 11, like I would probably have to be convicted on 2 and kind of have the feeling that I could maybe
there
trade
might be
up.
4 quarterbacks gone by 11. You're definitely going to have to trade up too. Yeah.
So like if you were offering me that, I would have to have some assurance that like, oh, okay, would you trade 11 and then the next first round pick to move up for the? Yeah, I would. Absolutely.
I mean, but then you at least you're in a little bit more control. And I'm not saying tank, but a little incentive, but I don't think that'd be the case.
I don't think anyone's offering that, by the way. Like I love Olave too, but I don't think anyone's even offering the 11th pick in this year's draft.
Yeah, well, I would
it's
not even about
if the Falcons will, if you're willing to pick Drake London at number 8,
and
you can get a guaranteed Chris Olave with 4 more years on his contract, healthy, young, fast, run any route, entire route tree. What do we? If a wide receiver can go in the top 10, then Chris Olave can be traded to the top 10, in my opinion.
Well, it's just that this year's draft class, it feels like every pick is worth double. Like throw out your old trade chart because of this year's draft class.
And look, I think
quarterbacks.
Let me just add it. Like I think Olave is like elite, a franchise cornerstone, like someone you feel blessed to have on your roster. But I would trade Randy Moss for a top 5. I'd rather have the top 5 quarterback than the top 5 wide receiver. Like the equivalent, I would rather have had, Mike Thomas is number 1 in the league or 2 or 3. Like I would rather have Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. Like it's just the positional value is just so much drastically different. It's not
I think the
slight on anyone, but anytime you could have a quarterback over a wide receiver, you're taking the
right. It gets tricky when you say, do you want to have Randy Moss over the 15th best quarterback in the NFL? That's when it becomes like a little bit tricky because you can't assume that it's going to be best case scenario when you're making that trade for that rookie, right?
Would you rather have Olave or Mac Jones? Like, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, they would have to better than Mac Jones, like right out the gate. Like even, like it's got to be someone you're talking about like high up because Olave has top tier positional potential. So
I'm just saying, Mac Jones is probably who's going to be drafted as the.
But I
in the,
wouldn't
yeah.
have. Not in this draft. I don't know.
Well,
There's
because
like
he
three
was
guys.
the
about
fifth.
that.
He was
Yeah,
the
I
fifth
don't know.
quarterback in that last. You know what I'm saying?
These have been weak drafts recently, though. This would be considered. And
we
listen,
thought
I
that
know
was
we
a
use this
special
term.
draft, and it was.
Yeah, this is a stronger quarterback draft. You got
But I think that's what everyone thought about the Lawrence,
Right.
Lance,
But in the
Fields. Who am I forgetting?
In the theoretical conversation of this, so like you're making the trade for somebody that you think has extreme upside, where I think like Mac Jones was like, well, maybe he could be Kirk Cousins.
Right.
He could be, he could be 80, 89.
I mean, if you trade
if you're letting me trade Olave for CJ Stroud, of course.
Well, that would be the trade, yeah.
But
CJ Stroud is like the quarterback.
They're going 1, 2, and 3. The Saints can't get
either one of those, like Levis, Alabama, Ohio State, like any one of those three guys that would have to be the target here to give up Olave. Right. I'm not giving him up for Hendon Hooker or Anthony Richardson or.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that
Arch Manning.
Bryce Young
right now. Arch Manning now.
Yeah, man, if we skip them NIL deals and come straight to the money. Yeah, I mean, like Bryce Young, which, Bryce Young is like the quarterback version of Chris Olave in some ways. Like when you look at him, like a guy, smaller frame, just super technical, makes all the right decisions. But yeah, anyway, I just thought it was an interesting question because it's, you look and say, how can they get a quarterback? And you just look at the assets you have. So, all right, that's going to do it for us. We're pushing the hour now. So,
use the code Black Friday on the website, 25% off.
Yeah, there you go. What Nick said, and use it in caps, and we'll make us really happy. So yeah, just go to NewOrleans.Football. Black Friday, get 25% off. It's the best time to do it. If you already subscribed, re-up, tell somebody new. Just do whatever. Help us, support us. Retweet these things. Like them on YouTube. Subscribe. Do anything you can to support NewOrleans.Football. We appreciate it. We need you guys. You guys have a happy Thanksgiving, man.